We live in a world of infinite possibilities, and yet we are always closed in some way to what's really happening in the world. But what if we could literally every day, in every moment, seek the higher ground, to seek something more expansive than we've known before, and to seek the infinite potential that lies in every situation? When we set out for something, when we try and create something in this life, sometimes we can get disappointed by how it shows up or if it doesn't show up at all, right? We can get frustrated by what shows up, that it's different than we thought. But the real reality is that when it shows up differently than you imagined, it's probably a sign that it's from spirit and not from your ego. Because if it's true that we live in a world of infinite potential and infinite possibilities, then the universe, God, has infinite ways to fulfill our heart's desire, to give us what we truly need and want. But we spend a lot of time bickering about form, about what it looks like rather than what it truly is and how it serves us in the long run. How many of us have wasted so many breaths about what it looks like rather than what it is, right? That you can hear it in our national discourse right now about what the color of people are and where they come from, and rather than the energy of the human experience that we are all here to celebrate and to dive into. The diversity I spoke about in the beginning, that Misa and I talked about, that radical acceptance of the miracle of the human form and of this experience here on life, of life on earth. What I want to talk to us today about is how we open to that and open to that possibility. And I believe that there are 4 centers of intelligence in our body. 4. So we are opening to infinite possibilities. And we do that by opening the centers of intelligence in our bodies. And first of it is our gut. Do you listen to your gut? Did you know that there are 100 million neurons in your gut? That science has proven that actually they have more neurons in your gut than they do in your spinal cord. And that when you can actually listen to the information of your gut, what it's telling you, it is informing your brain. It is informing your mood. It is informing how you feel about things. It is letting you know what's right and wrong. But often we ignore it. Yet any mother will tell you, don't make that decision on an empty stomach. That is both literal and metaphorical wisdom that comes from grandparents and from parents, that you must stop and take care of your gut first and listen to that intelligence. And then there's the intelligence of the heart. Now, here in California, the Heart Math Institute has been working for decades to talk about the radical coherence between the heart and the mind. And they have mapped how the heart actually communicates with the brain and tells it many things that it actually needs to know. How many of us have walked into a room and know that something just happened there? That is probably because you walked into the electromagnetic field generated by the people in that room, and your heart knows it intuitively before your head can figure out, oh, something just went on in here, right? But that intelligence of the heart is important for us to make wise decisions, right? There, of course, is the intellectual brain, the IQ, the brain that helps us figure out how to make rational and thoughtful decisions, how to take all the data coming into us and synergize it into a coherent decision. But when we just rely on intellect without the wisdom of the heart and the gut, we often make poor choices. And research has shown us, that people who actually have the highest IQs don't necessarily make the greatest successes in life. There was a study back in the 50s that started following people who scored over 150 in IQ tests. They were no more successful than their counterparts. And in fact, the study shows that people with EQ, emotional intelligence, are more successful in life. That combination of head and heart is essential to being able to know how to navigate life. And heart doesn't necessarily just mean sentimentality. It just means wisdom, right? The ability to navigate relationships. How many of us can be a success, can have an abundant life without being able to navigate relationships with each other? Either families, one of the hardest, right? Or friends and coworkers, right? I don't know which order comes first, probably families, coworkers, and then friends, if we had to quantify them. But the idea that those three centers of intelligence are important is a way for us to move into being open to wisdom from multiple sources. And then the final one is spiritual intelligence, the universal intelligence, the higher ground. You know, I like to think of it as divine wisdom, as universal knowledge, but it is also our ancestors. It is the wisdom of the planet itself, of Mother Earth, the wisdom of the rocks and the trees, of nature, of animals. And the native people all knew that there was intelligence in all of this. In our modern society, we keep forgetting. We remember for periods of time, we give lip service to it. But understanding that there is something going on that is higher and better, that there is a divine source of intelligence, of wisdom that we can all call upon at any moment, that we can use to move into the realm of infinite possibility. When we use all four centers of intelligence, we can step out, we can trust the universe, and we can utilize what is to become what could be. So what is? How do we open to what is? As I mentioned earlier, we often get really upset when things show up different than we thought they should, right? And there is some wisdom in Byron Katie's work, Loving What Is, to understand that everything in your life is exactly as it's supposed to be in this moment. Okay, take a deep breath as I say that, right? Everything in your life is exactly as it's supposed to be in this moment. Your kids are the perfect age, right? Whatever age they are. Your health is in the perfect place it's supposed to be at this moment. And I can hear the objections as I say that, right? I can hear the disagreement in my own mind as well. But we cannot get to where we want to go denying what is, right? If we're living in denial, we can't take the next right step necessary to shift to what could be. So when we fight reality, we lose only 100% of the time. When we fight what is, we are arguing with the brick wall. We are giving energy to the thing we don't want. We're giving force to something that we say shouldn't be there. And we actually are reinforcing it. So when we can open to loving what is, when we can open to even accepting what is, we can open to transmuting it, right? Eckhart Tolle, in his book, A New Earth, 3 decades ago, whenever he wrote it, says, the first step of getting out of stuck, if you're stuck in the mud, the first step to getting out is admitting you're stuck in the mud. And then you can call the tow truck. You can do the steps necessary to get yourself out of it. But if you're going, no, I'm not stuck in the mud. My favorite joke, the minister, the rabbi, the priest, the rabbi, and the unity minister end up in hell. okay, in hell. And the priest is over there in the corner, flames lapping at him, and the devil and the pitchfork going, "Oh my God, I am heartily sorry for having offended thee, and I detest all of my sins because of thy just punishment, but most of all because they offend you, God, who are all good and deserving of all of my love." And the rabbi is over on this side and going, "Oy vey, I was such a schmuck. I don't know what I did, but I was so bad. Oh God, this is my punishment. I shouldn't have eaten that bagel. It was someone else's," right? And they're over in that corner in their own personal hell, and the unity minister is in the center, and they're going, "It's not hot, and I'm not here. It's not hot, and I'm not here." We've all done that. Yeah, it's all good. It's all fine. Everything's all right. The real key is that disturbance happens because I find some person, place, or thing, some situation, some fact of life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that which disturbs me as being exactly as it's supposed to be. Some of you may recognize that quote. It is not mine. It is from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it speaks to the person struggling with addiction that says you can find no serenity until you accept life on life's terms. And that's the wisdom that transcends all spiritual paths. That we cannot find serenity until we accept what is exactly as it's supposed to be. So we open to infinite possibility. We open to infinite wisdom. We open to what is. The next step is to open to the opposite. You know, this great intellect that I mentioned earlier has so much to tell us, and it usually tells us that we're right. You know, it tells us that if everybody understood life and acted like we think they should be, that the world would be a much better place, right? But wise people practice looking at the opposite of what they believe. And in Byron Katie's work, again, there's something called a turnaround. At the end of her worksheet, where you process how much you hate your neighbor, it's called Judge Your Neighbor worksheets. If you've never experienced the work of Byron Katie, they're really fun. You really get to get it all out on a sheet of paper with free abandon. But it comes to a turnaround and asks you to name the thing you never want to experience again. So I never want to experience that pain again. And the turnaround is, are you willing? And you need to say, I am willing to experience that pain again. I am willing. Now, you may ask, why, Reverend Ken, would anyone ever willingly do that? So I'm going to ask all the women who've gone through childbirth here, would you be willing to do that again? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the reason that you may be willing to experience that again is for the joy of being a parent, is for the joy of the little one. I can take it easily, not so easily, I can take it now, 28 years later, to the death of my lover. And I would be willing to go through that pain again. Now, that may sound insane. I had to call his parents and tell them that their baby son had died, and I had to mourn and grieve. But I'd be willing to do that again because it would mean that I loved again, and I have loved again. If I had said I am unwilling to go through that again and would be closing myself off to the potential of love, to the potential of a relationship that was bigger, greater, more fulfilling, and being willing to go through the pain of loss opens yourself to the joy of having, right? And how many of us have spent so many hours shut out by our own doing from life itself, from our good? So exploring the opposite of what you think is right is a way to open to that infinite possibility. The next one is fun and play. We all take ourselves much too seriously. right? And so we here at Unity and me and my wife, we try and have more fun. We try to purposefully inject fun. One of my favorite stories and one of my favorite movies, if you've never seen it, is Steel Magnolias. How many people have seen Steel Magnolias, right? Well, being a child of the South, being grown up in Louisiana, and Steel Magnolias is set in Mississippi, so it feels like my cousins over there. And I'll easily go into my Southern drawl just for that. But there's this one moment, if you remember the movie, Sally Field is playing the mother, and she is at the funeral of her daughter, and does not want to experience this pain, and she is crying, and she's so angry, and she says, this is not the way it's supposed to be, everything we've just been talking about, and she's screaming, and she's yelling, and I just want to hit something, and her friend pulls another friend in front of her and says, here, hit Weezer. Hit her, just everybody wants to hit her. And they start, and Sally Field just in that moment, character just breaks down and starts laughing because it is such an absolutely ridiculous and wonderful idea. And they start crying and laughing all at the same time because that's the power of community. That's the power of to overcome the tragedy of death. Right? When my nephew committed suicide 3 years ago this month, I was with my sister, and she was inconsolable. And I was just sitting with her. And she said, I don't want anything religious. I don't want anything religious at the service. I'm so angry at God. I'm so mad. I don't want anything that has to do with religion at the service. I said, well, you're speaking to the right minister. We can do that for you. She laughed through her tears. And then 15 minutes later, we're still sitting there. And she says, I want to go back to where he died and I want to put a cross there. And I looked at her and said, you do know that's a religious symbol, right? And she gave me a whole stream of F-bombs directed right at me. And then we held each other and cried and laughed together some more. Just this week, I was strolling social media, and someone put on social media this book, this plan for their funeral, and it says, if I die. And I was so wanting to type into my social media feed, if? Shouldn't that be when? Somebody literally has a book that says, if I die, these are the plans. Well, none of us are getting out of here alive. So let's have some fun in the meantime. I didn't, because I didn't know the person, but if I had known them, you know me, I'm irreverent Ken. I would have said, what do you mean if? We are all not getting out of here with this body. We're leaving this body behind, going to that place of real infinite possibility and infinite potential. That place where we're not limited by a body. But in the meantime, let's laugh and have a good time. Speaking of good times, time. It is the easiest thing for me to go into lack consciousness about. It is the easiest thing to go, oh, there's not enough time. My AV director, he's a wonderful guy back there. He's 25 years old, and he's been coming here since he was 18. He's done an incredible job. But a couple weeks on platform, I said, I really don't have time to write a book, but I'm writing a book. And he said, that's a great affirmation, Reverend Ken. All right, kudos to Reverend Ryan Harvey in the back. I have time to write a book because I am writing a book, and I'm writing a book about this, about how we need to step into Einstein time, because Einstein time is all relative, right? When we can understand that we always make time for the things that are most important for us. We make time to go to funerals. We make time to take care of our children. We make time to take care of our parents. We make time to love. We make time to nurture ourselves. When we prioritize what is most important, time goes away. Do you know that only the intellect can understand time? The other parts of our brain The amygdala does not understand time. That's why, when we're in the middle of it, it feels like it goes on for eternity, because we are not in touch with linear time at that moment. But we can also use that same brain capacity to understand that when we can go to bliss, it is timeless as well. When we go to joy, it can be just as timeless as the fear and the pain. And when we can shift out of not enough to more than enough, perfect amount of enough, infinite time, because we're infinite beings having this human experience, everything shifts, everything changes, and we move into the realm of truly abundant living. So here's your 5. These are the 5 steps of manifestation. Name and claim your good. And then every step along the way, you refine what that is. You use all the intellect of your body and of the universe itself to move from what is to what could be by shifting your consciousness, letting go of those places that you made decisions before you were even conscious of it, that the world was against you or out to get you. And understanding that you can come from a place of knowing that the world loves you just the way you are, just like we tell our children here every week. You are the perfect example of that. And when we can shift our consciousness from away from not good enough, not this enough, into wholeness and understanding, then that's when our good starts to show up. And we take the concrete steps necessary to make that happen. And the concrete steps further refine our name and claim, further refine and help us focus on what might be underneath our desire, so that when it shows up, we might recognize it as our good rather than as a mistake that God made. And then we share our journey. None of us act alone. None of us are self-made. And that is just such a fallacy. We are all the product of the people who loved us and brought us to this world. We're all the product of our teachers, our mentors, our teams that make us all look and sound good. And we share our journey because we never know who might conspire with us to help us along the way. And then we are open to how it shows up. When it shows up, different than we imagined, it is a sign that it is from spirit, not from our ego, because the ego can only imagine and want to recreate something it's already seen or experienced. If you want a life beyond your wildest dreams, be willing to go beyond what you know and beyond who you've been.